Hello, my name is Brett Fairbairn, and this short video about cooperatives and politics is made available for your use under a Creative Commons license that allows you to share it freely as long as you attribute its source, the Centre for the Study of Cooperatives at the University of Saskatchewan. Co-ops have often been associated with movements for social change, but what about with political parties? In many parts of the world, there are understandings that particular cooperatives are close somehow with particular political movements. But what may be surprising is to know how different those political associations are around the world. In fact, cooperatives somewhere or another in the world have been associated with every political party and every political philosophy that exists. That's all the more surprising because for many years it was officially a cooperative principle that cooperatives were supposed to be neutral in politics. In fact, the idea of political neutrality was articulated as one of the oldest and most original cooperative principles, as long ago as 1832, when cooperative leaders in Britain passed a famous resolution that whereas the cooperative world contains persons of every religious sect and every political party, it is resolved that cooperators as such are not pledged to any political, religious, or irreligious tenets whatsoever. That statement on cooperative neutrality was reprinted in numerous cooperative publications over decades. So why is it that cooperatives declared political neutrality as a principle, and how is it that they became associated with many different political parties? The answer, I would say, is that cooperatives are rooted in communities, and where communities are working for social and for political change, cooperatives become bound up with what those communities are doing. The best way to understand the idea of political neutrality is that cooperatives do not take political stands where it would divide their members, but where members in a community are united in political beliefs, cooperatives have often been associated with those same beliefs. One of the world's most famous cooperative movements was in 19th century Britain, and that particular movement was associated with working class radicalism, with the Labour Party, with socialism. So cooperatives can certainly be associated with working class socialist movements. But in many parts of the world, cooperatives have been associated with conservative political thinking. How is that possible? In 19th century Germany, some important conservative thinkers and leaders, a writer by the name of Victor M.A. Huber, a cooperative organizer by the name of Friedrich Wilhelm Raiffeisen, were people who believed in social conservative values. They wanted to preserve the integrity of society and of the harmonious relationships among classes, especially the kind of relationships that existed in rural places. And they saw cooperatives as a way to do that, to band people together to support the good of the community and of the village in a way that was entirely in accordance, they believed, with conservative ideals. Similar ideas have been held among cooperatives in other parts of the world, often agricultural rural cooperatives, including in the United States of America, where rural cooperatives are understood to be relatively close in philosophy to the Republican Party. On the other hand, people who were 19th century liberals, people who believed in free trade, in civil liberties, in competition, have also become advocates of cooperatives. And these people would be the ancestors of people we might refer to today as neoliberals or sometimes as economic conservatives. A great example of that would be Hermann Schulze-Delitzsch in 19th century Germany. He saw that the wave of, I guess we'd say today, deregulation, of competition, of freeing up the economy was inevitable and he would say was good for society. But he also saw that there were particular groups that suffered from those changes. And in his case, he was concerned about artisans, self-employed tradespeople, shopkeepers, and small business people. And he saw cooperatives as the way that they could band together to participate in a new competitive economy and to sustain their livelihoods and their communities. And he was particularly concerned as a liberal, as a 19th century liberal, that people should be able to solve their social problems by their own initiative and not by relying on state intervention. So liberalism was very much part of what drove Schulze-Delitzsch and others in his tradition to be advocates of cooperatives. So conservatism, liberalism, socialism have all been associated with cooperatives in different times and places. and basically any other political philosophy that you can name. Nationalism. Nationalist movements in many parts of the world have used cooperatives to strengthen their communities and advance their ideals. That's true in the Basque region of Spain, where Basque nationalist thinking contributed to the formation of the famous Mondragon complex of worker cooperatives. It's true in places like Quebec, where French Canadian and Catholic movements of assertion contributed to Alphonse Desjardins' creation of Caisse Populaire credit unions, many other places in the world as well. In the Spanish Civil War, anarchists used cooperatives to seize land and resources and put them into production. And the same thing has occurred from time to time in other countries when abandoned factories have been taken over by workers. Populism. Between the First World War and the Second World War in Eastern Europe, many of the new governments of new countries that were created following the First World War looked for ways to mobilize their rural population and to improve agriculture. And it was really a kind of a populist appeal that was to bring in the people, to improve the people, to strengthen the nation. And they promoted cooperatives to do that. Populist rural movements in Western Canada and in the Western United States made similar use of cooperatives or collaborated with cooperatives to advance their ideals. So when people say that cooperatives are associated with a particular political party, that may be true in one time or place, but somewhere else in the world there'll be a completely different example of cooperatives associated with a different political ideology. And when people say that cooperatives might be neutral in politics, that's often true in particular ways, but experience has shown that reality is a whole lot more complicated. Cooperatives can't exist without, or don't exist, they don't thrive in large numbers without aiming to change society, and that often makes them political and leads them to form political kinds of alliances.